Jai-Lynn Rodriguez here with Eddie Kid Vazquez. How are you feeling today? How's everything going?
Feel great. A little rest time right now in between sessions before I go spar a little bit later on, but everything's going great. We're about I'd say about a month into training camp now. And things are ramping up and we got a little bit, I think about 5 weeks left, 5 to 6 weeks left. So we're starting to ramp it up more and before we start to take it back down and start to taper off a little bit before fight week.
You're fighting Rafael Espinoza May 4th for the WBO Featherweight title. And we'll get more into that. But before I want to discuss your story. You're from Fort Worth, Texas. So how is that? How is your upbringing like? And how did you get into boxing?
Yeah, so I grew up with three older brothers and a younger sister, but I had family members that were fighters. No one in my direct family was a fighter. Um, I had, like I said, cousins and stuff like that, but I come from a baseball family, and here in Fort Worth, we do have a few notable, world champions like Paulie Ayala and Donald Curry, and just that those are the two ones that I can think of right now. But I think we have four, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like a huge boxing town, especially when I was growing up. There wasn't a whole lot of boxing just going on. Um, but I don't know why. Like when I turned 7 years old, it was just something that I asked my dad that I wanted to do. I mean, ever since I was like 4, 5, 6 years old, I always had this like interest in boxing. We always would get together for like family cookouts and watch like Oscar De La Hoya or Bernard Hopkins, guys like that fight all the time. And so I guess I just kind of fell in love with the sport then. And I just remember being 5, 6 years old, and I would be out running in the street, and I would imagine myself shadow boxing or kind of just doing these things I would see on like the HBO like 24/7s or whatever they were back then. You see those kind of videos, and I would try to mimic that. And I just saw myself. I just visualized that in my head that that's what I wanted to be when I got older. So I always told my dad, "Hey, sign me up for boxing. Sign me up for boxing." And then when I was playing baseball like 4, 5, 6 years old, and at 7 years old, he finally took me and signed me up. And I can remember that day like it was yesterday. Walking into the gym, and it's kind of like a dim lighting type of building, and the people hitting the bags and the mirrors are like fogged up. It was I can remember it literally like it was yesterday. And I spent a lot of time at that gym. I was there all the way till they closed down pretty much. I can't really remember when that was. Maybe 2005 maybe. So I was there for, I'd say, maybe four years, maybe 3 4 years, and then we went on to another gym. So yeah, I've pretty much been boxing since I was 7 8 years old. 8 years old when I had my first actual amateur fight. But yeah, I've been at it since then.
What was your dad's initial reaction when you told him you wanted to start boxing and you're like, hey, I want to do this?
Oh, he loved it. He loved it. I feel like it was something that he definitely wanted to do, or like wanted me to do. Like he wanted to be involved with something like that. I think it brings a lot of pride to him and to our last name, that's for sure. So he always made sure. My dad was always like a runner, and so I think that's where I got that from. Like I always, like I said, I used to get out there when I was a kid, and I would run and visualize myself as like a world champion or one of these guys I saw on TV. But it was like because I was running with my dad. So my dad was always a runner, and I would go run with him every single day. And we still talk about that. We were just talking about that not so long ago, how um, I would start running with them like 5 or 6 years old, but by the time I was 8 years old, I was leaving them in the dust, and he couldn't keep up anymore. So yeah, my dad was very happy about that, and until this day, he still is. Like I said, it's I feel like it's a sense of pride for him, that's for sure.
Oh, of course, especially with the accomplishments that you made throughout your career. Any father would be proud. And you talk about, imagining yourself growing up. Who was a fighter that you looked up to when you started boxing and you wanted to imitate their style, how they dress? Like who was one of those guys?
Yeah, I really well here in Fort Worth we had Paulie Ayala, who's a two-time world champion, and I he was probably the first guy I ever saw like live. Like I remember going, I don't know, I was maybe 4 years old, maybe 5 years old, going to his gym to watch his like open workout, and he signed a boxing glove for me, and I could never stop talking about that ever since I was a kid. Or when I was a kid, I just told everyone about it, and I always talked about it, and I always wanted to go to Paula Ayala's gym. It was like it's funny, like my family still makes fun of me till this day because I always said that. Like, let's go to Palayalas gym. Let's go to Palayalas gym. So he's definitely probably one of my first like actual inspirations, that I got to see in person, and especially being from here in Fort Worth, it was like, wow, like that's. I mean, I guess at the time I didn't really realize like, oh, that's possible, but now looking back, yeah, like it's like wow, like you don't get a whole lot of shots being from Fort Worth, especially in boxing. And I guess he was the first like inspiration to let me know that it's definitely possible. So I would say he was one of my first inspirations. But watching guys like Oscar De La Hoya, when he was in the early 2000s, he was hot. He was coming up, and there was a lot of talk about him going around. So I kind of visualized myself going in that path also. But the Floyd Mayweathers, the Miguel Cottos, Fernando Vargas, those kind of guys, I really enjoyed watching those guys. And when I was a kid, I tried to mimic a lot of their styles.
Then you go on to your amateur career. During that time, did you ever think that you were going to go pro and make it a career?
Yeah, I always that was always like my end goal was to be a professional fighter. I, I wasn't like a bad kid in school or anything like that, but I I played football in middle school and high school, and I ran track and things like that. I was always involved with sports, but for me, I always just wanted to be a professional fighter, and so like I honestly could care less about school, and so I always just visualize it and tell my parents like I just wanted to be a professional fighter. I want to be a professional fighter. And my mom would be like, you have to. I remember being like 16 years old and her being like, Edward, like everyone wants to be a professional athlete. You're gonna have to get a job. And I'm like, Mom, no, I'm gonna be a professional fighter. Like you just wait and see. So yeah, like I just being a professional fighter was just something that, I felt like chose me, and that's what I stuck with. And yeah.
Your pro debut was in 2016. Leading up to that, your first fight becoming a pro, what was the feeling like? Was it surreal? Were you like, okay, it's time to lock in?
Oh yeah. Man, it feels like so long ago I can barely remember, but it was definitely a good moment. It was cool. It was here in my hometown, so it was cool to kind of like bring that, like like I always told everyone I was gonna be a professional fighter. That's all I ever wanted to do, and so to bring that to fruition was pretty cool, and to show everyone that I followed through. It was a surreal moment, that's for sure. But I always had bigger dreams, and I've like the dream or like the opportunities that I have now of fighting in Vegas, for a world title on ESPN. It's to me like that's literally everything I dreamed of. So it's pretty cool for it to happen. I think the only better opportunity would be like to fight for a world title here at the Cowboy Stadium. I think that would be like the ultimate cherry on top. That's something that I've always dreamed of.
Looking back at your past fights, is there anything you're looking to change when it comes to fighting Rafael Espinoza?
Yeah, well, I try to take a little bit of every fight that I have, and kind of take the good and the bad, leave the bad, take the good, and try to add more onto it. But yeah, I feel like I have the experience now, like versus Joe Cordina, going overseas and fighting him out there in Monaco, and then fighting a guy like Raymond Ford on DAZN, even though that wasn't for a world title, but he was highly touted as like one of the top guys at the time. Just those kind of experiences on the world level, being televised, things like that, I feel like are definitely going to help me be able to handle. I mean, it already is helping me handle, the pressures of being a world class fighter, and being in these positions where the spotlight's on you, and people are kind of counting you out, or even, they're expecting a lot out of you. So it definitely, all that kind of helps. But yeah, I've been against guys who are. I fought a guy from Panama who was just an absolute. I don't. He just wouldn't. He was a savage. He wouldn't stop coming. He wouldn't stop punching. And so I think like that's kind of like a guy like Rafael Espinoza who is a volume puncher. He doesn't stop. He's got a hell of a heart. And so I think I'm ready for that. But if also I've been against guys like, let's say, like Joe Cordina or Raymond Ford, who are more like movers, and they want to box a little bit, and I have to press the action and make things entertaining and take the risk and things like that. So either way the fight goes, I feel like I've had experience in every situation, really. In terms of, like I said, fighting a boxer or fighting in a toe-to-toe war, I'm ready for both.
So you talked about fighting Raymond Ford and Joe Cordino. With those fights, do you feel like it changed your mindset when it came to preparing for a fight or even stepping in the ring?
Not really, like in terms of preparing for a fight. Like if you know me outside of just boxing in general, that's just kind of the person I am. Like I could be 0-20 and I'm still training my ass off. Like that's just my lifestyle. That's just how I live. That's just what I do. I Even if I wasn't a fighter, I'd still be, out running. I'm running 10, 8, 10, 12 miles every single day, no matter what. I'm in the gym for hours on end, multiple times a day. That's just something I've always done since I was a kid. So that's kind of something that's just instilled in me. So I just, yeah, those fights, it kind of just proved to me like that I do belong at the top level and I can hang with these guys, and that everyone is human and they're not like some sort of like superhuman that can't be beat, because they can all be beat. And I kind of use those fights as more like motivation to, or inspiration, I guess, to know that yeah, like I said, they can all be beat, and it's about who works the hardest, in my opinion.
Which leads us to your fight with Espinoza. When you got the call being like, hey, we have this opportunity for you, what was your initial reaction and what was going through your head?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've kind of been begging my promoter and my manager, not begging, just kind of always telling them like, hey, like I want the top guy, like the top guys. Like it doesn't matter if it's 126 or 130. Hell, even if it's at 135, I've never been there, but I'll go there if it's the top guy. I mean, like I said, I've been fighting since I was, 8 years old. So it's going on 21, 22, if 7 years old, really. Like my first fight was at 8, but 7 years old, really. So almost 23 years now. And I, I'm not in this to like have a padded record or to be built up, really. Like I feel like those stages are gone, and so I just want to be fed to the wolves. And that's what I always tell my manager and always tell my promoter, like, just feed me to the wolves, just feed me to the wolves. And so after the Joe Cordino fight, I was, for a little bit I was kind of pissed off, and my promoter Lou DiBella was like, hey man, like no worries, like the world knows what you did, they saw what you did, and you'll be back. You'll be back at this level again in about 12 months. Like, you have my word. And he pretty much stuck to his word, although it was 18 months later, he was pretty close, and we're back right back in the situation. So when I got that call, I was ready. Actually before this, the Rafael Espinoza fight, I was gonna fight Rocky Hernandez in February, and then I was gonna fight uh Raymond Ford in April 12th. So like it was like we were revving up, waiting for something. I had just won the IBF USBA in back in, was it October, I believe? Yeah, October. So we were kind of, that put me in the IBF, higher up in the IBF rankings, and we got into WBO rankings, and we're in the WBA rankings. So I knew something had to pop. It was just a matter of time. As long as you keep winning, putting in the work, and kind of staying on your management and promoters, um, I knew something would pop. And so yeah, like when the call came in, I was ready. I was ready to seize the opportunity. And like I said, we were kind of already in camp, so even more so, I was like, hell yeah, send that contract. And they sent it real quick, and they came correct in all aspects. And so it was like, it was easy. You send me the contract, and I have my pen ready, and let's go.
And how does it feel to be fighting at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas?
It's man, that's crazy. Honestly, I honestly I still have a little bit of taking in to do. I guess when I get there, I'll be able to kind of grasp the situation, but it's I try to stay locked in. Honestly, I try not to think about that too much because I know that can kind of distract you, and or it almost makes it feel like you can just check it off, like, oh, we got here, we did this, and we checked it off, but the job's not done yet, so I got to keep my blinders on and stay stay focused on the task at hand, and that's beating Rafael Espinoza, whether it be at T-Mobile Arena or at a small venue. It doesn't matter. I got to beat this guy, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where it's at. The only thing that really, really, truly matters is getting that title and coming home with it. And um, maybe after I'll be able to look back and think, oh, how badass was that to beat Rafael Espinoza, win my first world title at the T-Mobile Arena. But like I said, as of right now, I try to keep my blinders on. I haven't really even been able to or tried to think about that, like how badass it is. But when you ask me, I'm like, wow, yeah, like it's surreal. It's even cool and sweet just to kind of be doing this interview with you talking about this because I was counted out, as a grown up as a kid or even as a professional up and coming. I wasn't always the most skilled fighter. I would say like the most like God gifted, but I've always been the hardest worker no matter what. And so to be in this situation and to be doing these interviews and like you said, going to fight at the T-Mobile Arena, it's all just a big blessing. But I know that nothing happens by coincidence, and I'm here for a reason, and that's to go win the world title.
And that's another thing. I think that there's a big difference between someone that is constantly working hard and then someone that's kind of God gifted, like you said. You definitely see the hard work pay off, and for you, it has paid off, and you're right here, right now, getting ready for this big fight for a world title shot. With that being said, what's something you want to prove to the people that are overlooking you?
Yeah, I feel like there is people overlooking me, but also they're not so much anymore after they see the kind of performances I had versus these top guys. So I mainly just want to prove that those weren't flukes. Like, I didn't just beat Ray. I mean, on the scorecards or on the actual record, I didn't get the win, but I beat Ray Ford's ass and Joe Cordina. And so I want to show the people that that wasn't just like a Ray Ford off night or Joe Cordina off night, as they both said, like, just so happened to be their most of their off nights. And that's not the situation. The situation is that these guys are God gifted and they're in these situations because of their talent, right? And their connections. But when they face a guy who has that dog in them and is going to outwork them, it's going to expose them every single time. And I kind of want to, I want to prove that. I want to prove that, like I said, it wasn't a fluke, and I am the hardest worker in boxing, and it doesn't matter who you put in front of me, I'm going to expose them.
I mean, you're fighting this tall, lanky dude. What are you expecting from him uh, come fight night?
Like what? Like in terms of in the fight
Yeah, in terms of in the fight, his
yeah.
mentality, like I know you're focused on you, but is there anything that you're looking out for without giving too much away? Obviously, you're in camp,
Yeah.
but what's something that you feel like you're expecting?
Yeah, well, I think for him, just like for me, it's a really big opportunity. We're the co-main event to Inoue, so at the T-Mobile Arena, it's huge, and it's for his for the WBO world title, and so I think it's huge for him just as it is for me. So I think he's gonna come for it. I think he's gonna come and try to put on a really good performance. And maybe he's trying to, line up a bigger fight on down the road. So maybe he wants a good performance, not just a win, but a solid performance. And so that's kind of what we're expecting, and that's what we're training for. We're training for the best Rafael Espinoza, and I know his coach Manny Robles is, a good coach, and he's a veteran in the game, and so they're not overlooking me or coming in just for just to win on the scorecards. They're going to come in and they're going to come and they want to go to war, and they're not backing down, and they're gonna try to knock my head off. So that's what we're preparing for. I want to first off, I want to show them, like as I always do, that I'm the hardest worker. I'm the hardest worker in boxing, and also I want to show that I'm able to make adjustments on the drop of a dime. So whether that be I have to press the action or have to box more, whatever the situation is at the time, we're covering all bases in training camp, and you'll see the best Edward Vasquez yet. I've been at the World Championship level one time, and the second time is going to be even sweeter.
May 4th. After, I know you're not overlooking him, but after, is there anyone you have your eye on or you're looking and being like, hey, I want a shot with you?
Yeah, if I beat Rafa or when I beat Rafael Espinoza, obviously I would love to try to unify with maybe Nick Ball. I feel like that would be a good entertaining fight where we're both kind of come forward pressure type of fighters, and we both kind of have, or he has the win versus Ray Ford. I have a good fight versus Ray Ford, so I feel like that's something that the fans would love to see. I would welcome Inoue into 126 and give him a warm welcome there. Um, Going up to 130 and giving Ray Ford, a rematch at 130. Those are some of the matches that, in my head, I could see happening in the future.
So you're keeping your options open. You're
Oh,
willing to go
yeah.
up and down in weight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I've done. I've gone up and down between 126 and 130. And I always, do that based off of how long my training camp is. If it's, if it's a 8 to 10 week camp, then I can do 126, or anything less than that. I always ask to go just to stay at 130. And that's just because I don't want to compromise my performance or my health just because I'm trying to make weight. So I want to be able to give my fans the best.
Let's say all goes plan fight night. What would be your main goal? I know you talked about going up and down in weight, fighting these guys, but would you want to become undisputed in the 126 division? Is that something that you're open to?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I don't know how long I could stay at 126. I think I could say maybe 2, 3 more fights at 126. That would be great. If we could make that happen. Um, and then going up to 130 and clearing that division out also, that's something that, is always in the back of my mind, or I guess in the front of my mind. Um, any of the world champion guys, or any of the top 10 or top 5 guys are really my interest. My main goal is just to, go in and whoever my promoter, my manager put in front of me, I don't ever turn them down. So I just want to beat all the guys they put up in front of me, and stack as many titles as I can, and ultimately just make my city and make my people proud here. We haven't had a world champion in Fort Worth in like almost 25 years, so it's time. It's time to I think we had one like I think we had one in the 70s, one in the 80s, one in the 90s, and then we skipped the early 2000s. Now we're 2025, so it's time to make it happen.
Me being from Texas, I live in Houston, so it's always nice to see a Texas fighter
Oh, nice.
unify and kind of become a champion and
Yeah,
represent
yeah.
the state. When your career is all said and done, what do you want to leave behind in the sport? What do you want people to think when they say Eddie Vasquez?
Yeah, resilience, being resilient, and just always, knocking on the doors, and then knocking the door down after a while. That's kind of where how I built a name for myself. I've of course, you start off local for a few fights, and then when that call comes in to go out on the road, you just prove that you're the hardest worker. And like, you probably heard me say that in this interview multiple times, because that's what I stand on. I stand on being the hardest worker, because that has nothing to do with talent. And like I said earlier, I've never been the most talented, but I've always been the hardest worker, and I stand by that. Like, I will always be the hardest worker in the room, the hardest worker in boxing. And so, I want, when people think about Edward Vasquez, or think about boxing and Edward Vasquez, I want them to know how I made a name for myself. And that's just going out there, taking on the challenges, going on the road, and upsetting these guys, shaking hands, and making business deals and things like that, or making friends, and just trying to make connections and climb up the ladder. That's it's not like I never really had any kind of crazy backing. I've always kind of did it off the muscle, and that's just, getting out there, showing people how hard I work, that I'm not afraid to get in there with anybody. And when they do call, I show up and I put on a badass fight. And that's what I want people to know, is that I'm a warrior through and through.
What is the biggest thing that's motivating you besides your work ethic? What keeps that work ethic going?
Yeah, well, of course, my daughter and my family, they're like my first piece of, I guess, motivation. I always say that motivation is like, it comes and goes. I think discipline is ultimately the what you need in boxing, or I mean, even outside of boxing, discipline is what you need. So motivation always wavers, but my family never doesn't waver. So like, if you're asking for motivation, it's definitely my family and my daughter, and and my family. This is who I do it for, and they keep me going and they keep me inspired, and I just want to be able to make them happy. I want my when my daughter gets older, I want her to be able to look back and see that, I went for it. I went for it, and I went for it for my dreams, to give her a better life.
I mean, my last and final question for you, for the fans that are looking forward to see you represent Texas, Fort Worth, what's the message that you have for them, and what are you looking to show fight night, May 4th?
Yeah, yeah. I just, I want to tell all the fans, especially here in Fort Worth, that we're at it again. We're at it again on the road, coming in as the underdog, as we all do here in Fort Worth. And I'm coming to pull the upset, and they know what to expect out of me. I come, and I'm going all out. I'm not leaving anything in the ring, and I'm gonna come back. And we're gonna bring that world title back home to Texas for the first time, and like I said, or I guess Fort Worth, Texas, for the first time in 25 years or so. So I appreciate all the guys, or everybody, for all the support. I appreciate all you guys for the support, and I'm gonna bring it back.
Well, thank you so much, Eddie, for taking the time to let me interview you. I know we're excited to see a fight, especially that whole card. It's going to be great. But again, thank you for the opportunity and just to discuss your upcoming fight and what we can expect from you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you.